The first transaction we ever did, we didn't have any of this experience. It was learning by making mistakes, failing forward, as they say. So we didn't really spend any time with the employees. We did the entire transaction with the business owner. It was consummated, closed the deal, champagne, everybody's happy. And then half the employees quit because they didn't feel like they had any control. They weren't empowered with the decision. They didn't know if we were forced to hire them. They had no knowledge of what was happening. So that was a massive learning curve.
Welcome to the Great Talent, Great Business Podcast, your go-to resource for building exceptional teams and thriving businesses. Each episode delivers actionable insights on harnessing offshore talent, integrating innovative technology, cultivating a vibrant company culture, and attracting and retaining top performers. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. For more resources, visit greattalentpodcast.com. where you can download this episode's free worksheet designed to help you apply today's insight to your business. And now, here's your host, Rob Levin.
Today, I'm joined by Eddie Solomon, co-founder and co-CEO of Net@Work, a leading technology advisor to small and mid-sized businesses. Since 1996, he's played a central role in building the company's reputation for helping organizations grow through smart use of business technology. A seasoned entrepreneur and strategic leader, Eddie is deeply focused on creating a strong workplace culture, supporting digital transformation, and driving long-term client success. Eddie, it's awesome to have you on the podcast. Let's dive in. But before we do, I just want to say to the audience, I've known Eddie and his brother, who's the co-CEO, Alex Solomon, for over 20 years now. And it's been amazing to watch what you guys have done, you and your teams have done with Net@Work over the years. It's just been awesome to watch that, and I'm just thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you. I was going to say, we go a long way back. We've become friends over the years. You were the first one who taught us about advertising in New York Enterprise Report, which was really helpful to us, taught us a lot about networking, advertising, meeting people, growing business through relationships. So, thank you for that.
Oh, it's just been so awesome watching the growth that you guys have had over the years. So, you and Alex have done, how many acquisitions have you done over the years?
We've done over 40.
Wow.
Some of them are what we call acqui-hires, where it's one or two people with a book of business who join our teams, which is fantastic as well. And others have been much more substantial with regards to number of employees and assets and clients. And they were just a lot more as far as integration. But yeah, we've done quite a few. We still continue to do that. And it's been an amazing learning experience from the first one to what it is we do today.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think you started acquiring, I remember during like the downturn, 2007, 2008. So I want to actually start with acquisitions, and then maybe we'll go back to organic growth. And in particular, when you're looking at a acquisition target, and this is over the years, when you're deciding to consider buying them, how do you assess the talent lineup at the acquirer? Is it about the talent? Is it about the customers? Is it a little bit of both? And I guess the second part of that question is, to what extent is their culture important? Like the consistency with their culture to yours, or is that something that you can, fix and adjust afterwards?
Great question. So just by way of background, what we do, as you know, but just for the greater audience, we are a professional services organization. We implement technology solutions for small to mid-sized companies nationally. So everything we do is based on our knowledge, our expertise, the tools we use, and the relationships that we develop with our clients, which means that talent is all we have. Like, we don't build houses, we don't make food. We're all about the conversations we have internally with each other, with our teams, and with our clients. That's how we move the needle, based on conversations going well. And those conversations, especially as we've grown, and Alex and I have had to continue to delegate and bring on amazing leaders and amazing team members, talent is key. Not only that, when you're doing an acquisition, the talent is the relationship to the customer. It's really difficult to bring on a book of business with a lot of clients that are so concerned about the support continuing, because what we do for them is crucial to their business, and it's very complicated. So the talent that comes in, having those people join our organization is how we maintain the relationships with the clients. So it is super key. As far as culture goes, that's tricky. That's been certainly something that we've constantly improved and continue to evolve in how we think about that. Initially, when we started doing acquisitions, we were very sensitive to the different cultures that we were learning about at these companies that were now going to be part of our organization. And we tried to accommodate for all those types of cultures. But you can't really have a business with 20 different cultures based on pockets of business units and things like that. So that was a little confusing. We spent a lot of time in advance of consummating a transaction with the employees
Of the company that you're buying.
Oh yeah. Once the owner is comfortable to discuss the transaction with their employees, which takes a bit of time because the first thing that happens is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? And once they announce, we have a session with our leadership team, their entire team, we introduce ourselves. And one of the first things we say is, we want you to interview us, and we want to earn the right for you to work with us.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, because we can't assume that everyone's just going to come along with the transaction. That's not fair. And the first transaction we ever did, we didn't have any of this experience. It was learning by making mistakes, failing forward, as they say. So we didn't really spend any time with the employees. We did the entire transaction with the business owner. It was consummated, closed the deal, champagne, everybody's happy. And then half the employees quit because they didn't feel like they had any control. They weren't empowered with the decision. They didn't know if we were forced to hire them. They had no knowledge of what was happening. So that was a massive learning curve. We never did that again. Now, the employee engagement in advance of the deal is what takes the longest amount of time and is the most sensitive. And we spend so much time with one-to-one discussions with each and every single one of them.
You're making that investment up front because you obviously figured out that it pays off.
Yeah, it's the most important thing.
Yeah. Now, to what degree, if we go back a little bit further in that process, to what degree do you have the ability and are you assessing the talent of an acquisition target before I mean, obviously, you got somebody in your sights, you've started the discussion, you're doing due diligence. That includes financials. To what extent are you looking at the employee lineup? And to what extent is that affecting your decision and how you're moving forward?
It's much more important for us to bring on the talent than the clients. Now, of course, the clients pay the bills, and that's where we want to grow and continue to add value because we do so many different things that we want to be able to continue to add value to the client's business. The client experience and the client journey is what NetWork's all about. But without the employees joining, it makes it very difficult to engage with those clients because it's new, everybody's nervous, it's a very important part of their business. So we look at that first. We take a look at who's going to be joining us. Obviously, hopefully there are no red flags that we see where the culture is a bit off and the employees are either overworked, underpaid, burnt out. Maybe there's been something going on in the business. Those are red flags that we definitely tackle head on, make sure that we can work through that with the employees, with the team members that are going to be joining us.
Yeah.
But that's really key. The clients, the contracts, the work that we do, those are numbers on a spreadsheet, also super important because we want to continue to add value to the new customers that we bring on. But without the employees, it makes it very, very difficult.
Right. It's interesting. I've always said that you put your employees first because I think it's harder to come by really good talent today than it is to come by new customers. Not saying that new customers are easy, but everything's just a lot easier if you have the right talent on board.
Absolutely. And by the way, sometimes that's what we're really focused on. Sometimes it's not even the book of business, it's the talent that we need because we have work and we're continuing to expand and we need more people. That's why we don't have one office location where everybody can come to because we need to hire talent wherever we can find talent.
All over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah. Taking a step back a little bit, now have 450 people, most working remotely, I believe, right?
Yeah. Even before the pandemic, we were about 50-50 remote. We had a larger footprint in New York City, which is still our headquarters, and we still have an office there. We had about 20,000 square feet. We're down to less than 10. And it's set up as a kind of like a facility for meetings and events. Some people work there on a more regular basis, but primarily it's where people get together. But even that, we were used to the concept of remote. And then once the pandemic hit, of course, we were 100% remote, and we never really went back to some days on-prem, some days remote. I would love it if we can all get together. If I can get 450 people together, it's just very difficult, very costly, not practical.
Now, we're going to come back to that in a second. But what I want to ask you about is how has the culture evolved? Obviously, you have a very positive and healthy culture. You never would have made it to where you are today. But how has it evolved over the past, I guess we're looking now at 30 years or so, right? How has it changed over the years?
Well, if you would have asked me about culture in the first few years of my business, I would have said, that's a nice thing to talk about, but I'm just trying to make a living.
Right. Yeah.
And then as you get more experience, you get older, you learn, you calm down a little bit, you realize that it's all about the culture of the organization. We hope that we're hiring very motivated people who want to do a fantastic job and love what they do. And then we try to inspire them to really be part of our purpose and make an impact with our clients. And the culture makes a big difference. And it all starts with our values that we didn't, again, same thing. Day one, did we think about values? It was like, yeah, that's a nice thing to put in your website. Let's move on. Then some years later, we had the benefit of doing a formal evaluation, team meetings. We got some outside help, and we were able to look behind us with regards to, okay, I guess we have values. Let's just now, like, who are we? We've established our culture. Now let's kind of define it. And also a bit aspirational. Our values are not aspirational, but to some degree, we want to continue to improve based on the values that we have, which creates the culture.
Yeah. In one of the talks that I do, I talk about how, of course, it's easiest to set the tone and create the values on day one. And then a lot of companies are in the same shoes that you were, which is, hey, we didn't really get to that. We did not really appreciate its significance and its importance. And some companies never get there. And I think their success gets limited by that. But I think when you do that, it's funny. I talk about the same thing. It's about, even if you're 20 years in, define those values, make them a tiny bit aspirational, because again, you're always stretching, and it really becomes powerful. Now, I'm curious, over the years, you've had extreme growth. Over the years, have you had to make any trade-offs? Like, you remember the early days when you guys were all in one office, right? And, everybody's there together. You're able to celebrate wins in person. What are some of the trade-offs that you've maybe had to make over the years as you've grown so big and become a global company?
I think, yeah, I'm sure we've made many trade-offs over the years in the way that when we started the business, Alex and I were very much more in control of everything that happened in the company to an nth degree, which probably is the way young entrepreneurs all behave.
Yeah.
So we've learned how to delegate. That's been really important. And it took me quite some time to figure out how to delegate, because my natural inclination is to just fix the problem. That's one of our values, problem solvers. And that comes from Alex and myself. So I've learned how to delegate and still delegate within boundaries. That kind of helps me saying, okay, I'm going to delegate, but not, decisions that will shut my business down. So that's been a learning experience and a bit of a trade-off. But I think the largest, I guess, using the term trade-off, is we're obviously very entrepreneurial. Network is just one of the businesses we have. We've had some that we've sold. We've had some that didn't work out so well. So we've done a lot. An entrepreneurial culture is also very important. Again, one of our values is entrepreneurial, being an entrepreneur within the organization. But at the same time, as you get larger, you need to institutionalize. I read this Harvard Business Review article years ago, and it talked about how somebody had a company and he needed to do work in Asia. He needed to do manufacturing in Asia, and he hired somebody, gave this person complete control. And he was very entrepreneurial. He's like, oh, this guy gets it. He didn't have any controls in place. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. And then his business was in financial trouble. And then he had to file for bankruptcy. And what he said was, a bureaucracy is better than bankruptcy. Right. So you do have to put in some institutionalization, but you don't want to lose the entrepreneurial spirit. And it's kind of like this axis where you have them aligned for a short period of time. Then something happens. You get a little too entrepreneurial. You feel like, whoa, this is the Wild West. Bring it back. or you get too institutionalized where everyone's just following a playbook and no one's thinking out of the box.
Right.
And it's a constant struggle to keep that in a good place where both of those are functioning properly.
You just reminded me of a conversation I had with Alex maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And he said, you think when you're a $3 million company, you kind of made it through all the hard stuff, right? And then you get to 10, and I'm making up the numbers, and then there's like a whole bunch of challenges, and then you think you made it there, and you're like, you're good. And then you're at 20, it's like, where did these challenges come from?
Yeah, you know it is. It's like kids, little problems,
Yeah,
big kids, big problems.
yeah, it's a great analogy. This episode is brought to you by Work Better Now, your trusted partner for getting high-performing talent from Latin America. Our clients tell us that partnering with Work Better Now has transformed their businesses by providing the proactive, reliable, and skilled professionals that they need to thrive. Ready to build your dream team? Visit workbetternow.com to schedule your consultation today. As a special thank you to listeners of the Great Talent, Great Business podcast, we're offering $150 off your first 3 months. Just mention great talent during your consult. Join the businesses building their dream teams and take the next step in transforming yours today. I want to come back to the whole remote thing. You obviously have a very strong culture that you wouldn't be growing the way you were if you weren't delivering amazing service and value to your clients. When it comes to having 450 people working remotely all over the globe, what are some of the things that you do to keep them engaged, to keep them productive, to keep those values in place?
I think one of the benefits of being a remote organization, and there's so many challenges. Again, if it was up to me, we'd be able to get together more often. It's important for young people to be mentored in person with somebody they can grab a coffee with. There's so many things that could be better if we were all together. However, because we don't have that luxury, we just don't. Like, if we were a factory, of course we would all be together. We'd have to be. If we were a medical office, right? Then you just have to be deliberate. It's not something you can take for granted. That's really the difference. Now, thinking about getting people together, making sure that everybody understands what our values are, how important they are. You have to talk about these things more. You have to be more proactive about having communication. Certainly, systems like EOS, Traction, those help because it gives you a formal way of communication and alignment and meetings. That really helps because then you don't have to do things ad hoc. You have a platform for how to connect. And then you also train your leadership team who have the day-to-day communications to also make sure they're proactive about it. One of the things we started doing during the pandemic, because everybody was remote and it was also very stressful, we started a program called What Makes Me Happy. And it was 3 o'clock every day, and people would get on the phone and somebody would talk about their hobbies or somebody would talk about their families, whatever, didn't even matter. And people connected that way. And it was everyone was looking forward to it. It was 15 minutes, a half an hour. That was it, but every single day. Since the pandemic's obviously over, and that's kind of morphed into Connect at Work. So it's still happening. It's not with the same impact of people just being nervous and alone because of the world, what was going on in the world, but it's still something we continue to do.
There's something that you said. First of all, I totally get it, is we're 100% remote, also with people on 2 different continents. And from day one, we realized we got to really over communicate. And then when we adopted EOS, this was like having that platform just made life a lot easier. And I think it empowers people, and then you don't have to micromanage. But there's something that you said that I want to just come back to. You said something about, and I'm using my words, not yours. You said something about training your leaders in how to communicate and how to manage a remote environment. Is that like a formal thing, or is that something informal? As you've grown to 450 people, to what extent are you training, and training might be a strong word, your managers, your leaders on how to lead an organization this big that's fully remote?
That's a great question. And just coincidentally, from a timing perspective, we just had our first session this past week for our leaders. One of our former employees who used to be the practice director for our Pixify e-commerce group, we introduced him to EOS. He loved it so much, he became a trainer. So he does that now full time, and he's fantastic at it.
So an implementer?
An implementer.
Yeah.
And we brought him in to do some sessions for us. And the whole point of the sessions is for leaders and how to have the quarterly conversations, making sure that they're not reviews, they're not performance reviews, because nobody enjoys that. They're more about mentorship, career development. Who do you enjoy working with? We have a Women at Work mentorship program. So again, it's all about being deliberate. And the mentorship program is somebody who's more senior within the organization with more experience and a more junior person. And there's a formal mentorship process that our COO, Gail, started some years ago, and it's just working really well. And they have events, and this program, we do it every single year. So again, it's really more about focusing. I think of it this way: all the money we're saving on rent, we can spend it on these types of things. That's another trade-off, right? So now we had the budget all along. Let's use it to make sure that our employees feel engaged, feel inspired, feel like there's an opportunity for growth within the organization, all those good things.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. Instead of the money going to the landlords, which of course has value, but putting that money essentially into development. Speaking of which, how do you think about and what kind of programs do you have for career development and internal mobility? Because a company your size, that's really important.
Yeah, that was a really interesting learning experience for me and very eye-opening. Some years ago, during or after the pandemic, I was having a conversation with a group, and we were talking about, I don't know how it came up, but I said, how many of you bring your friends in or tell your friends about Network and recruit them to come and work for us? And I didn't get the response I thought I was going to get.
Right.
And I'm like, what's going on? They said, well, there has to be an opportunity for them to grow. We want to introduce them to an opportunity where they feel like there's a career path for them. I'm like, what do you mean? And of course, like to me, having people who have learned one thing to move to another area and share that just makes sense because we're business units and we're matrix structure. So that knowledge being shared between business units creates the opportunity to break down silos. And there's so many positives. And I thought we were doing a great job. And we were announcing things like apply for this role. And clearly we weren't doing enough. So we really doubled down on that effort, almost to the point of we were like encouraging people to learn something new and to apply for another role. And now that's when we open up a new rec, that's socialized with internal employees first before we go to market.
Right. I think it comes down to something you said earlier, which is just being deliberate about it and conscious and then being deliberate about it. Very powerful.
And we have somebody who's been with us for over 25 years. She started out as head of professional services, then she moved to head of HR, and now she's head of learning and development. And that's her full-time job, starting from what we call first-year associates, hiring young people out of school. After they graduate, we put them through a one-year rotation, then they get placed at different business units, starting with those programs, and then having learning and development and career development for our teams. We brought in consultants for leadership development. So we're investing a lot. And I'm not going to say it's enough because I was surprised then, and I'm no longer going to assume anymore that it's enough. So we continue to make sure that we invest in this ongoing. It's so important for us.
That's amazing. That's something that you think big companies are doing. And I guess at 450 people, you're a pretty big company. Eddie, thank you so much for this. I got takeaways for myself. I can't wait for my team to watch this episode along with our audience. And it's just been a pleasure watching you and Alex grow the company. I've always looked up to you guys as entrepreneurs, and it's great. I really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thanks, Rob. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Eddie. See you soon. Thanks for listening. The Great Talent, Great Business podcast is brought to you by Work Better Now. Don't forget to review, subscribe, and download the worksheet for this episode at the link below. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on LinkedIn at Great Talent, Great Business or visit greattalentpodcast.com.